It's back to school season. Just sent the boy off for his first day of grade 1. And that means I'm gonna have a little bit of extra time in the morning. I decided to fill that time with photography tutorials. Oh boy. Now these will occur in no general or specific order. Just kind of what I feel like talking about that day. Which means you kind of have a little bit of creative control. So in the comments, if there's anything that pops in your mind, anything photography related that you want to learn, drop it in the comments. Help me make my next video, because I'm lazy and I don't like thinking about ideas a whole lot. No tutorial till coffee. In today's video, I want to talk about a concept in photography. I refer to it as natural framing, where you are looking to compose an image through something, with something around your subject, with something naturally bringing your subject to the focal point of the image, because that's what photography is all about. Photography is about me directing your eye where I want it to go in the frame. And the better you get at photography, the easier this becomes. And once you're used to looking for these things, it becomes something that you default look for when you're taking an image that could be confusing or busy or coffee's almost ready, and then we're going to talk about the rest of this. I'm going to hop into my iPad and Lightroom, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples. I did have a stylus. I don't know where it went. I'm just far too lazy to get out my tripod this morning. Okay, so let's hop into the iPad, and what I'm going to be showing you here is a collection of a couple of photos that I took while on vacation with my family in Niagara to illustrate this point. Now the first image we're looking at here is just a clock tower on in Niagara on the lake. Nothing inherently wrong with this shot besides the gigantic collection of tourists underneath it posing for a photo. But as a photo goes, it's very basic, it's very essential, it's very like, there's the thing. Now when I talk about natural framing, whenever I see an interesting subject like this, a person, an object that I want my viewer's interest to go to, I'm looking for a way of framing it that naturally brings it out, and what I landed on was this image here. Now I'm going to throw a quick edit on this to show you guys kind of like how I would edit an image like this, but really quickly and almost immediately you can see how this object has become the point of interest in the frame. I'm going to throw a little bit of a better crop on it to get that stroller out of the way. Straighten it up a little bit because it's slightly crooked. These ones are always kind of hard because it's difficult to determine what you want straight as far as a line goes, but I want that garbage straight, because if I were to get rid of that, even that there, everything else looks fine. I could adjust the vertical axis, but I'm not going to right now. This shot automatically has a little bit of your attention already drawn to the clock tower, right? So now you have these focal points framing the clock tower in such a way where your eye is kind of naturally drawn to the center of the image in between these two objects. I'll slap a real quick edit on this using one of my presets. Really love this teal and orange preset. This is not a plug, they're not for sale. So there's that. And already we have kind of an interesting looking image in comparison to the first one. Now how do I bring this out even more? How do I enhance the image even more? I am personally a massively huge fan of gradient filters and radial masks. So what I'll do here is I'll throw a little bit of a gradient filter on and I'll drop the exposure of the outlying elements. And you'll see this is really only affecting that other side, like right there, that's what it's affecting. And the key to these gradient filters and the radial masks is not to bring it down so low that you can tell there's an obvious mask on top of it. I want to bring it down just low enough so I'm starting to pull focus towards that thing that I want people to focus on. And oftentimes it's just altering the foreground elements, right? So I'm making the ground darker around it. I'm going to draw the sides in a little bit. And this is one where you have to be careful because you're affecting the sky. And then I'm going to put another one on top. Again, just bringing the sky down a touch. Now already, with I shot this at golden hour, which is pretty much a cheat code for photography. Already you're seeing a lot of attention being drawn to that clock tower, and then kind of a final touch would be a radial mask around the clock tower itself. Once you've established your radial mask, fit as such, bring the exposure up just a little bit. These are all, one of the most important things to this, it's all about spice, right? No matter if you have a really shitty cut of steak, all the spice in the world is not going to make that steak just perfect, right? But if you have a really great steak, spice will bring out that flavor, and that's what's really important, and that's how I see stuff like this. You have to start with a good image. If you don't start with a good image, your final image is still going to be trash. Now with an image like this, if I wanted to enhance it even more, I might Photoshop a better sky into it, because this sky is kind of mundane, it's blank, it's not doing a whole lot for the photo, but we're not talking about Photoshop and sky replacements today, we're just talking about framing. Anytime I'm doing anything like this, I'm often going to be dodging and burning with radial and with gradient filters to bring that subject out just a little bit more. Here's another great example of natural framing. So we have this couple walking down the pathway, it's the morning, like wee hours in the morning. I woke up at like 6 o'clock a.m. to get down to Niagara Falls so I didn't have to battle tourists to get some nice shots. And I have this couple walking down this pathway, nicely, naturally framed by the trees in the foreground, giving us a very clear focal point. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop the image a little bit, just to put them on the rule of thirds, which is another compositional rule we'll talk about. But just enough to kind of like, because there's a lot of negative space on the top of the image, this gets rid of that negative space. I'm going to adjust my exposure a touch, drop my highlights. That looks pretty good. Let's roll over to a preset. For instances like this, not bad. Worse. Teal and orange, it's fire. I'm going to use this preset. This preset's called Babin, as a shout out to Tyler Babin, because I really love in his photos, it's a lot of like orange, yellow, and red that are saturated, and the rest is kind of desaturated, and that's what this preset does. And already we have a little bit more focus on the image that we want. For this specific image, I'm going to jump back into my color, and I'm going to bring back some of the greens. Not fully, just a little bit. Now we have a nicer looking image already. Before, after. Again, spice. We're just looking for spice here. And then, again, we're going to go to our selective layer. We're going to drop some gradient filters on. Reduce our exposure a little bit on that top one. What I like to do is I'll bring it down so I know it's too much. So like too much. Just right. And I'm going to do the same thing on the sides. Again, just working to bring that subject into our point of focus. And you can see I'm not dropping the exposure by too much. That's my big thing. I don't want to drop exposure by too much. I don't want it to be like overtly obvious. Like you see these pictures where the vignette is so intense that you know there's a vignette applied. And I don't like that. I like it to be just subtle enough that I'm bringing focus into where I want focus to be. Now you can already see that this image has taken on a very different feel to the original. Again, we're going to go back to our selective. We're going to add a gradient around this nice elderly couple that I was creeping on. We're going to bump the exposure around them, again, just a touch, like 0.35 is all I'm going up. And that looks really nice to me. I really like that. In fact, what I'm going to do a little bit more, I'm going to take this mask here, and I'm going to drop the exposure a little bit more. I still want those, actually. So I'm going to drop the exposure and bring the highlights up, because those highlights being cast by the shadows are really nice. Adds a little bit more to it, so we're almost dropping the exposure in the shadow areas and leaving the exposure we're leaving those kind of like those lines on the grass in front of them, which is really nice. I like that. That's a solid photo, in my opinion. I could go a little bit further again in Photoshop and bring out the oranges in the sun rays and stuff like that, and we'll make a separate video on like my touch-up process in Photoshop. But for now, we're just gonna rock this. Another one, and now, so as far as natural framing goes, let's talk about this image really quick. This image doesn't inherently have a natural frame around it, but the use of the shadows, the use of the flowers in the foreground, are all going to be important as far as bringing out that point of interest, that biker, right in the center of the street. I really love this image. This is probably one of my favorite like street images I got from Niagara. Let's tweak her up a little bit. Now I remember originally I used a preset on this. I think it was the teal and orange. You can see the ones I use the most. I really like this teal and orange one though. Already we can see we've added some stylistic choices to it, so we've enhanced the color a little bit, but let's have a little bit more fun with it. Again, we're going to go into our selective, select our gradient, pull it up from the bottom just enough that we're covering that shadow line at the bottom of the map, or bottom of the picture. I don't know why I have gaming on the mind today. We're going to add another one over here, in line with the building. Darken that down a touch. And the big thing I want you to notice is the roadway here. What I don't want to do is put so much on it that you can really overtly tell that the roadway is being darkened. Again, like I said before, this is all spice. We're going to do the same thing. I don't want a radial, I want a gradient. There we go. We're going to do the same thing on the side. And if I wanted to be really picky about this one, what I could do is I could darken that side a little bit, and then I can erase. I can actually erase up here to make that a little bit lighter. So I'm only affecting the tree line, keeping that sky unmolested, so to speak. Now let's take... Now here's where I had a lot of fun with this image in the original edit. Instead of putting a radial filter around the subject only, what I did was I'll take the subject, I'm going to make this really small so it's really only touching like the top, what is this? The top of his head and the parts of his body that I want lightened up. And we're going to lighten him a touch, just a touch. But then we're going to add another radial mask all along the roadway here. This is where radial... Come on, iPad. This is where radial masks can get a lot of fun. We're just going to make it big enough so it's crossing the roadway here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into color. We're going to find a color. I'm going to blow up the saturation. We're going to find a color kind of like that guy there. Now obviously that's overdone, but if I take that down, it's really bringing out the oranges in that golden hour feel on the road. So original, newbie. Original, newbie. And now in kind of going back and forth between those two images, you can kind of see... Actually, it doesn't look that bad. I was going to say you can kind of see that he looks a little unnaturally lightened. And he still kind of does, so let's adjust that a touch. Again, these are easier adjustments done on a computer. But I like using my iPad. Is that why? Why is that there? Delete. That's why. I had like some extra gradient filter or something like that over him. Maybe it just applied to. Anyway, that's a really nice image. And then we can take that even a step further by going back to our selective layer. You'll notice that I really, really love these selective layers. And go up like that. Increase a little bit of the feather, and let's just paint down the side of this building here. And then we'll get rid of the bottom portion that's being affected by the tree lines. Go to color, and we can find a nice color that really brings out that building on kind of the teal side of things. Drop the saturation just a touch. Just a nice accent to the entire photo. Now, natural framing, how it applies to this is you've got the object in this natural frame here and here. Naturally framed by the sunlight. You've got natural framing in the foreground element, which is the flowers. And then you've got the shadows in the back that if we wanted to intensify that, we can drop the shadows, increase the highlights, increase the whites, and bring him out even more against those shadows. Now, I don't really like the feel of that image, so we're going to undo those. I like that one right there. There's the before, there's the after. Finally, probably one of my favorite images from Niagara, the Skylon Tower. And this is a picture. I love these shots because these shots just make themselves. Like, realistically, I have very, very little editing to do in this photo to make it good. Like, really good. So, straighten it a little bit. Again, we'll apply a nice preset to it. See, and here's the instance where like the teal and orange doesn't really work well. Let's try and adjust the exposure a touch. Bringing up the exposure kind of helps it, but you can also see it kind of destroys it. So let's look for a different one. There we are. So this is a preset that I kind of modeled after Sam Colder. And it really just brings those greens down, enhances those yellows, oranges, and reds, keeps everything fairly muted. And again, like, that is not a lot of work done to this image, and it already just, it looks like a banger. It's awesome. All of these areas are all blocked off naturally. I didn't have to do anything for this. Even just leaving it like that, it's a great image. I didn't have to do barely anything, no dodging and burning because everything's already dark. The only other thing I would do, if I wanted to be really particular, is Photoshop this out. Again, not going to do that today. But these are all examples of how I would naturally frame images. All these pictures are just... you don't have to think about it in order to know where your eye needs to fall. Except that one. See, that's a good example of what not to do. All these pictures draw your eye in to where it needs to be. There's no, like, the second you see that image, and this is what natural framing, in a nutshell, like, bottom line, natural framing to me. Natural framing makes you not think. There's no thought process involved. Your eye goes where it needs to go. And that, to me, is what this technique is all about. This compositional rule is all about. Still abiding by the rule of thirds, putting my subject on the third lines, leading lines if I have them, but framing for me, like, this is just one of those things where if I see it, I shoot it, it's just good to me. Hope this tutorial was valuable to you. Hope this technique brings you a lot of great luck on the street, or portraits, or landscapes, or whatever. There's so many applications for this. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment down below. Tell me what your favorite compositional rule is. If you really dug it, make sure to subscribe because I plan on doing these a lot more often. Hit the like button, the bell. This is 2019, almost 2020. You know how YouTube functions for folks like me. I like to help more people, and in order for me to do that, you got to help me out a little bit. So, get out, start shooting, have some fun with this, and tag me on Instagram, @WadeTheMac. I want to see your shots. Okay, goodbye.